Where did this hell just spring up from? Listen, Julie, listen. I love to talk to you, but I'm waiting on somebody. Jason got up to leave, and Julie was right behind him, spraying her ear with her problems like an AK-47 in the hands of a coked-out Tony Montana. Jason, Jason, she called. Are you listening to me? She asked. 15 minutes in, Jason stopped in his tracks, staring at another girl he'd never expected to show up here, of all places. Andrea, his ex-fiancée. The one he would have married if she didn't catch him in a quickie with the ex behind him gnawing his ears off. What the fuck, Jason? Jason! Julie called again. Andrea turned right around and looked, but the laugh and beautiful smile she was sharing with her friends quickly turned sour. Julie stood next to Jason, staring, like a bad memory resurfacing, this time with a vicious intent. Andrea threw her head to the side, then turned and walked away. Jason chased her to the back door of the house. Andrea, damn, how are you? He asked, quite excitedly. Andrea lit into him like lighter fluid on charcoal. This isn't supposed to happen to me twice. We were supposed to get married, Jason. I loved you. I fucking loved you. And now fucking 10 years later, I see you standing with that bitch like fucking reminder of how bad you broke my heart. The fuck, Jason? You know what, though? I'm not going to do anything to hurt you, and most importantly, myself. And yes, I am fine. Andrea blew her breath and went into the house. Jason blew his breath and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The sweat just wouldn't stop. Within seconds, his pits and back were soaked, and his crotch was bailing water by the bucket loads. His heart was at tachyon speeds, and he couldn't make sense of what just happened. All he knew was that what Andrea saw was exactly how it looked. She was the only girl he truly loved, inside and out. Now the nightmare had returned some kind of awful to kick him in the balls. His reserve broke, and his wild days of his chaotic self ran to the surface and consumed him. Fuck it, he said, his eyes blacker than dark matter. He stripped buck naked, then jumped in the pool. The girl screamed and got out, Lonzo cursing. What the fuck, Jason? He yelled, peeved that his friend had ruined his vibe. What's your problem, he asked. Jason dove deep under the water. He just wanted to stay there. He wanted to stay there till the barbecue was over and everybody was gone. Till the heart-wrenching reminder of what he did to Andrea was gone. A quickie ruined his life more than ruined his life. Jason came back to the surface after Lonzo grabbed him. Get off me, Jason demanded. Lonzo didn't back off right away. Yo, what's up, Jay? Lonzo asked again. Jason dove again, then came back to the surface a few minutes later. Fucking Julie is here, he explained, spewing pool water from his lips. So? Lonzo replied. Wasn't that like 20 years ago? You and her? Yeah, but nah, it's fucked up. Andrea's here too. She fucking saw me talking to Julie. It's like '06 all over again, Jason explained. Damn. Lonzo dug out. You got fucked up and banged Julie on the side of my house. I remember that. Then Andrea pulled up with her sister and saw you. Oh, damn, Jason. Lonzo backed off and got out the pool. Jason swam to himself, trying to clear his mind. Not her. I didn't want to hurt her, Jason explained. Nah, it ain't about hurt. That shit was just bad timing. Like two locomotives coming at each other on the same track. Just bound to crash. Lonzo went for a towel and grabbed one for Jason. I'll be at the grill if you need to talk. Lonzo left Jason a towel by the edge of the pool, then ran to the other side of the yard to eat. Jason closed his eyes and thought about the months of rehabilitation he endured and applied them to his pain for Andrea. Every time it hurts, but thank God that you survived and that it didn't kill you. Jason thought on it till his feelings of despair and anger left his heart and mind. And with his eyes still closed, he dead man floated in the deep end of the pool. A few minutes later, Andrea, pushed by two of her friends, stood a few feet from the pool. Go ahead, talk to him, they encouraged. Okay, she answered. She took a deep breath and called his name, Jason. Jason opened his eyes a little clearer and looked over at Andrea. And that is the end of chapter 12. And we are coming up on 20 minutes in, with 25 minutes left. Amila slapped Mr. Yabayir's cheek. Her saliva, like baby oil, covered almost the entire left side of his face. Then he did it again. He let Mila at his cheek again, and she bit, gums and all, till saliva ran again. He laughed, looking at her, smiling. He gave Miles back to me and used his handkerchief to clean up. She's a good baby. Beautiful, muy bonita, Mr. Yavair commented. I miss having babies in the house, he said quite solemnly. Now, all I and Cecilia look forward to is old age and travel. He took a sip of tequila in a stocky shot glass one might see in a neighborhood bar, but of course it was more expensive. Mr. Yavair is a very elegant man. He's charming, tall, very articulate, and educated. He was tall, much taller than me. He reminded me of old Spain, a conquistador. Mrs. Yavair almost sat beside him. They were like an old 18th century portrait. She in her gown and he in his shirt and pants, suspenders and all. His hair, now almost all gray, lay short and tapered. His smile was deep, and his eyes closed every time he showed them. Mrs. Cecilia complimented him well. Her tough, strong, yet elegant exterior proved an unbreakable backbone, one I'm sure Mr. Yavair has praised her for over these many, many years. The five of us, in their Park Avenue penthouse, enjoyed a posh yet enriching afternoon. We had red wine and caviar, my first, may I add. We watched early 20th century Dracula with Bela Lugosi and talked politics and news on the neighborhoods. I watched in absolute delight as Mr. Yavair attempted to change Jamila's diaper, only to find she hadn't quite finished her number 2 business. He talked of his family background, his mother from Russia and his father, Mr. Yavair Sr., from Spain. His expertise on finances broke through my safe, ripping my secret from my lips. I didn't want to brag, but I was scared and I needed his help. I didn't want to seem like I was trying to overstep my boundaries with Mr. Yavair, with Mr. Yavair in front of Miss Cecilia. But she didn't seem upset at first until later on that evening. Mr. and Mrs. Yavair, you've been everything and more this afternoon, and I cannot thank you enough. There's no way I can ever repay you for your hospitality and the level of luxury you have afforded my daughter and I this afternoon. I took a deep breath, trying to hide the trembling and fear. Okay, well, here it goes. I really need your help, Mr. Yavair. Mrs. Yavair does not know of what I speak, and I should have told her sooner. Excuse me. I turned to Mrs. Cecilia and apologized. She rose in her seat with a slight look of worry, and I did not mean to alarm her. Mr. and Mrs. Yavair, I have come into a lot of money, and the past year and a half has lifted me out of the most horrendous and surreal circumstances. I won a jackpot on a scratch-off ticket and collected a lump sum of $1.5 million. I've already spent about $400,000 on a home and a car and furniture, clothing, etc. for my daughter and I. I've developed a pretty good budget, but I am not completely aware of exactly what I'm doing. I would love your help, Mr. Yavair, in banking and investments, enough so that we can stay well off for more than a few years. I exhaled a tornado on the room, or so I thought. Mr. Yavair had taken off his lenses and rubbed his brow. He gulped the rest of his tequila down and let out a loud ah. He stretched his arms and legs and leaned against his antique work desk. $1.5 million. Lottery. I do not believe it. He shook his head. I blushed, embarrassed. What did I just do? No, Mr. Yavair. He cut me off, smiling. Okay, you win the lottery. Unbelievable. You're the first person I've met to ever do so. The irony is, people with lottery money are 10 times more likely to go broke than somebody who's earned their income. So I understand your concern. Mr. Yavair shook his head again and said, how? Truly intrigued. A corner store near where I used to live in Stanford. I still don't believe it. I must have spent over $1,000 over the years buying those tickets. Then one day, bam, light bulb, I explained. I bet, he answered. There was an awkward silence in the room, mostly from Mrs. Yavair, and I didn't know how to break it. I was like a siren in a cemetery. What's all the emergency about? What I did not see and almost miss was what was going on beneath the tension. Apparently, I had released the right information at exactly the right time and in the right place. What I learned that hour was how much Mr. Yavair loved making money, and every opportunity he could get his hands on to make even more proved even better. Mrs. Yavair pulled me out onto the balcony, a little disgusted. What's going on, Iya? She asked. My tongue was tied. I didn't want to tell her what I should have already told her, what she should have already known. Mrs. Yavair, I haven't been all the way honest with you. There's a lot to me and Waldo that I'm not told you and Mr. Yavair, and I'm sure Waldo hasn't either. The tears fell. Well, the first few did, but Mrs. Cecilia caught the rest with a small handkerchief. We haven't been honest with you either, Ia. But what's honesty in this cruel, cruel world? Mrs. Yabayer answered. Mrs. Yabayer hooked her arm in Ia's and led her into a sitting room. The housemaid came in with Miles and left. Mr. Yabayer was on the phone in his office. Mrs. Cecilia, I know the bond between mother and child can decide the fate of nations, but I take full responsibility of what went down between Waldo and I over the last 13 years. We were not Romeo and Juliet. It was nothing like what you and Mr. Yabayer have. Mrs. Cecilia cut her off. Ia, what I and my husband have has been built over 20 years. We are a fairy tale because we worked hard to become one. I didn't start out in such happiness. Federico's father showed me hell in high water. Yes, Mrs. Yabayer, but Waldo is so troubled deeply. He has some kind of gorilla in him, and the fear of leaving him kept me under him for more than 13 years. He beat me. He beat me, Mrs. Cecilia, and I don't mean fussing and fighting. Do you know I didn't find out I was pregnant till after Waldo beat me bloody, and at the triage I was given a pregnancy test. I was so scared to go back to him I stayed out, and do you know that same day I caught him in our house having sex with another girl? But I was so worried about the baby I carried, I didn't even tell him I was there. But God has a way of showing up and making a way. I was out in the street, beat up and pregnant with a winning lotto ticket in my pocket, and I didn't even know it. Mrs. Yabayer patted my hand and looked me in the eyes. Her eyes were bright and fearless, and I appreciated it. Ia, everything you went through with my son, I went through with his father, and I loved him. I loved Wallace more than life itself, and he did everything in his power to break me. Do you understand that true love is no accident? Never apologize for leaving my son and being blessed. You're a lovely young woman who has blessed me with a lovely granddaughter, and I cannot be any happier. Never feel inferior to anybody, because there are people in this world who will use that to destroy you with it. Enjoy life with me, Ia. Be here with us. We are old, and time is no longer a luxury. I didn't bring you here because I thought you were weak or less of a woman. I brought you here because I like you. Please, please, let us forget why we're hurt and drink more wine. Miss Cecilia helped me wipe my tears, and we drank a little more wine. Mr. Yabayer came into the sitting room a little while later with a bunch of information for me. I'm sure my beautiful wife has told you that in 2 years I am retiring, and the two of us are moving to Spain. Yes, I answered. Oh, good. I am very good at what I do, and I won't take more than 10% of what is earned. Agreed? He verbally told me. Oh, I agree, I verbally answered, trusting him. Okay, listen to me very carefully, okay? Because I cannot do this overnight. You might be able to, but I can't. We both laughed. I have 2 business partners that I invest with. They're really, really good friends of mine, and I've worked with for many years. Here's some information I gathered. Monday morning around 10 a.m., I need you to call this man, Arnold Carbriati. Arnold Carbriati. He's my financial planner and a very well-respected golfer. I've already told him the backstory. All he is going to ask you for is your investment amount. Now, my advice is to listen to him first. He will lay out options in plain terms so you can understand, okay? Then decide how much to give him. Understand that he is high level. Do not tour with him. If you are going to invest, plan to invest a large bulk of that money you won. How much do you have left, he asked. Well, I have $750,000 in my savings account. Excellent. I will seriously invest about $500,000. My heart thumped. I didn't want to give him out that much, $500,000, but I needed to trust Mr. Yabayer. $500,000, I answered. I promise you, Ia, by the time I retire, you will be right where you need to be, he explained. I trembled, but as I looked around my surroundings, I clearly saw that he was well taken care of, and his advice is probably the closest to stability I'll ever receive. So I accepted. I shook his hand and placed Mr. Carbracio's business card in my purse. We laughed and talked a little more until Amila was fast asleep in her chair. I was tired as well, and Mrs. Cecilia asked if we were ready to go. I thanked her and Mr. Yabayer for their help and hugged them. They escorted me to the helicopter pad on top of the apartment building. I was in tears by then. They were leaving tonight for Paris, and they